Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Rebecca Clyde, CEO of Botco.ai, which helps businesses convert content into conversations. Rebecca, I'm so excited to chat with you, especially from a content standpoint and really uncovering, I think, a lot of maybe mystique or mystery or things you might not know or understand about generating content and also converting that content in an advantageous way. And really excited to chat and dive into what that means from Botco's standpoint of view. And before we get into all that, what were you doing before you started the company?
I was running a full service marketing agency, really focused on helping large Fortune 500 companies with their marketing automation, all of their demand generation, and digital strategy overall.
Yeah. And what it goes into, when we talk about marketing and demand generation, are those like different campaigns that they're running, both visually, physically, and online? And how do you know or evaluate what is going to be best used for or utilized for that product or that company and where to kind of focus the attention onto in terms of the marketing side?
Sure. Yeah. So for a lot of the businesses that I've worked with in the past, they're always trying to grow, right? So they need to have a way to grow with existing customers and also a way to attract new customers. And so that means they have to be constantly communicating, generating interest and excitement in their offerings
Yeah.
and also connecting with those potential buyers or existing buyers in a way that is meaningful. And
Yeah.
so I've essentially made a career of that from my earliest days when I started at Intel doing that kind of work. And then eventually also as in this consulting capacity as an agency. And then now as a software vendor, essentially
Interesting.
supporting the automation and the expansion of that capability now using AI.
Yeah. And what was the incumbent before people started using intelligence to monitor or really kind of create an efficient process and also track the different campaigns or the different, I guess, initiatives that they were doing? What was the incumbent technology that people were using?
Well, they were either not doing it at all, was I found mostly, or maybe it was a combination of spreadsheets and data just kind of smattered across a lot of different systems. And so the ability to now organize all of that content and then utilize it in a way to engage consumers and to engage customers in a way that was meaningful. That's one of the things that we have really supported. In
Yeah.
our organization at Botco.ai, we're really trying to help with not the creation of the content, but taking all of that material that has already been
Hmm.
produced and now converting it into a conversational interaction, because that's how we're really wired more as humans nowadays is to
Yeah.
converse, which is what you and I are doing right now.
Yeah. How do you do that? How do you convert something that somebody engages with, whether online or physically, into a conversation? What are the mechanics behind getting there? And then what is the conversation about and how do you guide that conversation?
Absolutely. So there's two methodologies for this. One of them is to take, say, all of that material, all of that content and those data sources, use what we call kind of like a knowledge extractor, generate
Yeah.
a question and answer pairs from that data. And now you have this like massive FAQ essentially that's created
Yeah.
from that content source. So that's one way to do it. And then there's a new way to do it, which is saying, okay, let's actually take that, but now let's narrow it down so
Yeah.
that every time we see a question come in from a customer, we've narrowed down what those sources might be, and we're kind of guessing where the right answer is and pulling it from those original sources before we even generate
Yeah.
those question and answer pairs. So it's a little bit of a like skipping that step and going in
Yeah.
more for that, finding that like needle that might be in that haystack,
Yeah.
as opposed to maybe like more of a search results style.
Gosh. Yeah. Tell us, selfishly, I always ask about from somebody who's been in content generation and content overall, what are some of the more popular trends and new ways that companies are starting to generate content? Is it through new mediums? Is it a certain style? What's kind of, I guess, trending, for lack of a better word, but what is trending in regards to companies and how they're engaging with their audience and their customers more?
Sure. Video content is a very popular medium just because we're visual human beings. And so we really like video content. That's
Yeah.
very powerful. And then conversational interfaces, which is what I'm specialized in, is the place that we really shine. And
Mhm.
so a lot of times, one thing we've noticed, like, for example, somebody might come to your website, for example, and in the kind of pre-digital anything, right? How did they do
Mhm.
business with your business? They had to either call you or they had to literally drive to your brick and mortar building and schedule a
Can.
meeting. And that's how you conducted business, or maybe a phone call. But then came websites and we said, oh, you don't need to do those things anymore. You can just visit our website and you're going to get everything you need to buy our products. Well, that's not exactly right. People come to your website and they have questions. They're not sure. They need to understand X, Y, or Z. Maybe they need a bit of information before they can make a decision. So there's all of this stuff that has to happen before they're ready.
Yeah.
And right now we have done such a great job turning everything into like a beautiful visual point and click experience that we have forgotten that people still have questions.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing at Botco.ai is creating that ability to answer any question that your prospective buyer or your existing customer might have. We're even
Mm.
finding that a lot of employees are using that conversational interface because they find it to be so knowledgeable. It knows things that even their team members don't know within their
Yeah.
organization. And so just the ability of quickly being able to ask any question, get the right answer, and then know what the next best action is, have that recommendation of what the next best action is. That's really changing the game now in terms of how businesses
Yeah.
are interacting with their customers.
Yeah. I know it's been some time since the idea was conceived and you kind of launched the company, but what was the original catalyst? What were you seeing? Was it a frustration? Was it a lot of people talk about the intrapreneur, whereas you see the problem through many organizations, and then you're like, the solution is in every situation or scenario, and it's now time to generalize it and expand it to the masses. Was that your experience, or was it different than that?
Yeah, it was definitely something like that. So I had been in a demand gen, a B2B marketer for a while where we were generating these kind of what we call drip campaigns, like
Hmm.
nurture campaigns over a period of time where you would send people that had come to your website or had visited your trade show emails. And the idea was, hey, if we send them enough emails over time, they'll open enough of those or read enough of those that they'll learn about our company. And then at one point, raise their hand and say, I'm ready to buy something or I'm ready to talk to you now. That's
Right.
kind of like this kind of like 2000s marketing automation model. And I think that at the time that was super novel, of course. But what happened in the 5 or 6 years ago, the world really shifted to more of an on-demand experiential expectation. Everything became on demand. It started with on-demand movies, and then it moved into
Right.
on-demand transportation and on-demand food. And literally every business model shifted to that on-demand expectation. And what I was noticing is like, hey, these marketing automation platforms are not allowing for that. They're not
Yeah.
accommodating that new expectation that customers are having. And so this idea that you're going to slowly drip something over time and then eventually they're going to raise their hand, like that's an outdated notion. That's not how people really behave. And that's not
Yeah.
what people want anymore. They are going to be going about their business and then all of a sudden they need something, they need an answer, they need information. They're going to ask the question, they need that piece of data or
Right.
that data point. And then if you can't provide it, that's game over for you.
Yeah.
You're not going to go back and look at the email that you sent them 2 weeks ago. Forget it.
Right.
Like,
Right.
they
Right.
just want to
Yeah.
go and find it now.
Yeah, yeah. It's so fascinating, the interactivity of it. And obviously it's not or maybe it is an active conversation, but it's really just generating the information for the questions that you have. And it's amazing that that collaborative experience, because it's almost like you're uncovering it as you need to know that information. And circling back here to Botco, what's been exciting about the traction that you've seen not only last year, but in this coming year? What are you particularly excited about? How many companies are using your platform, and what are you excited about in terms of this next year? Is it new features? Is it 10xing the growth? What in particular are you excited about?
Yeah. Well, 2023 is the year of AI, and more
Yeah.
specifically, conversational AI.
Yeah.
Finally, conversational interfaces are cool again. They always were, but we all of a sudden everyone's talking about them and realizing, like, wait a minute, this is a really important way to dispense and consume information. And now we have the capabilities to do it at
Yeah.
scale in a way that's
Yeah.
dynamic and real time. And
Yeah.
anybody can ask any question at any point in time and get a really great. What we have focused on at Botco.ai is saying, hey, we're not going to give you the answer of the summary of the whole world's large language model. We're going to give you the
Yeah.
answer based on your business and based on the products, the services, the policies that you have within your organization, so that you can trust that the response is going to be appropriate for whomever is asking that question, whether it's a customer, an employee, a prospect, a sales prospect, or anybody like that.
Yeah. And on a personal note, as a founder yourself, and we think about the founding landscape, and there's obviously odds against people who of color, being a BIPOC or being of Latinx descent. What in particular was challenging for you, falling under some certain categories in communicating not only the value of the product, but also, you as a founder? Because a lot of times they talk to VCs and they talk about they're betting on the founder as much as they're betting on the product or company. What conversations did you have to really take advantage of not only your experience, but your expertise to then get that support and backing from the founders or the venture companies that you were looking to partner with?
Yeah, well, it goes without saying, I think women get less than anywhere between 2 and 3% of venture funding. And
Yeah.
women of color, it's like 0.5% of all the venture funding. So it's almost non-existent. You're right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Botco.ai, though, we managed to overcome that stigma, I guess. And it just came from sheer hard work, honestly, Julian. This was not an easy journey. I mean, it
Yeah.
was swimming uphill every day and just being willing to make more phone calls, being willing to have more meetings, being willing to do more work every single day over and over again without stopping. Like that relentlessness is really what allowed us to be successful. Giving up was just never an option for me.
Yeah.
And so I didn't, right? Maybe it's my Latin passion and
Yes. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
get through this. I don't care what the world says.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
going to take no for an answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I went through hundreds of no's, obviously, but it was like, that's okay. There's more people to talk to. There's always somebody else. And then eventually,
Yeah.
because I got so many no's, I got a ton of practice.
Yeah.
I got better at my craft. I took all the feedback and really used it to make our company, our products, everything better.
Yeah.
And I think in the end, it was like kind of like going through a refiner's fire. We became
Yeah.
all the better for it. So
Yeah.
definitely hard, definitely not fun, but
Yeah.
at least we got through it.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a founder in a similar position in the sense of being more prepared for those conversations or tackling that learning curve more efficiently and effectively? Because we all can get feedback, but implementing that feedback, I think, is where the challenge is for a lot of founders or a lot of people in general. What advice would you give them in terms of refining that process and doing it and so that it's advantageous?
Sure. Some of the feedback is just useless, quite honestly. There was somebody who tried to tell me I shouldn't smile so much. And this investor was like, oh, I'm not investing in you because you smile so much. And I'm just like, I can't do anything about that at this point. Like, my smile is who I am. And if they don't like my smile, they should definitely not work with me if it bothers them. So some of the feedback is just ridiculous. But if there's some decent feedback there where I'm hearing kind of thematically something over again from a few folks, like if I've noticed it a few times, I'm like, okay, there's a there. Like I'm starting to see a kind of some consistency. And then I will take that and really take it back to my team, say, hey, I'm hearing this.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Let's work on this. Let's kind of iterate and go back to the drawing board on that one item and see if we can improve upon that. So it's just a matter of like understanding what's worth listening to and what's not, and then knowing how to integrate that feedback into the organization and make the product or make the pitch or whatever it is that we needed to address better.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you, as a non-technical founder, non-technical meaning not an engineering background in particular or actively engineering before, what did you learn throughout this founding process that you wish you knew earlier on?
That's interesting. I've worked in the business of technology my entire career. So my first company, a big company that I went to work at right out of college was Intel. So I was always surrounded by engineers, and I learned very early on in my career how to talk to engineers. And a part of my job was to like talk to them, understand what it was that they were building and creating that was novel and special and unique, and then translate that into something cool and consumable from a product and kind of more marketing point of view. And so I've been in that space for a really long time. So I think just having a comfort level with technology is really important, of course, especially if one's going to do a startup, because we do spend a lot of time working on the product and we have to have like a basic understanding of some concepts. But in terms of what else I was surprised to learn, honestly, it was more, I did not expect when I started this whole journey that I would have to become like really versed on sales.
Yeah.
That's for the right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I literally had to learn sales. Like I attended all of these like workshops and had to go to all these investor kind of panels that they would do and like try to teach us sales. And I had to learn like the discipline of sales. Now, am I great at it? No, but I had to learn it in sufficiently so that I could at least get the company to a point where now I brought in the pros and they're now running sales, right? But
Right. Right.
prior to that, it was like me trying to
Yeah.
figure this out. And I've always known how to build a business or how to like do business development and attract clients. But
Right.
doing B2B SaaS sales is like a very precise discipline.
Yeah.
And that's what I was most surprised about having to learn on this journey.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard that a few times from different founders, and it's just like the regimented consistency of the sales cycle that you have to really learn. And it often helps you kind of inform your team in the future, but it's not necessarily the most fun to do as you're thinking about kind of road mapping and all the greater vision and the partnerships, but a necessary evil nonetheless. What are some of the biggest challenges that Botco faces today?
I mean, gosh, like everybody right now, it's like we're trying to navigate a very capitally squeezed economy at this
Yeah,
moment. And
yeah,
so the venture capital is a little bit not slowing, but they're not moving as quickly or as voraciously as they were in the
yeah,
past. And so
yeah,
there's that. And then I'm seeing a lot of my customers that maybe took on a lot of debt or had leveraged themselves heavily. That has become more difficult for them too, of course. And so there's just not as much money flowing in the market, which means everybody's being a little bit more cautious, a little bit more thoughtful, maybe holding off on spending and that affects the whole ecosystem.
ab-
So just navigating that right now is important and realizing like this market requires, I guess it's what I was created for, right? It requires extra work, right?
yeah,
We're going to have to do 2, 3 times the work today that we maybe did last year to get the same result, just
yeah,
because of the way that the market is right now. And just, I think it's not hard. I don't think that's a terrible thing to think about. It's just like a new framework. Like, okay,
yeah,
that model that I used last year, it doesn't work this year. So it's like, what's the new model? What are the new metrics we have to be thinking about? What are the new baselines we have to be working with? So it's just kind of shifting all of those things. So we spent a couple of weeks really going back to everything and reconfiguring all of our pipeline metrics, our goals, our levels, just our expectations of ourselves to reflect the new market that we're in. And that's on all levels, our productivity, our spending, even how we approach growth in the business. All of that has had to change.
yeah, yeah. And if everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Botco?
Well, becoming the preeminent AI chat cloud, right? That's what I like to think about. We started with this whole idea of creating chat experiences. And then we realized like,
Yeah,
wait a minute, the hard part of generating the chat experience is actually getting all the content that is
yeah,
relevant into the kind of knowledge base for the chat experience. And so we
yeah,
focused on automations to produce that capability. So now we're doing the automation of the content conversion into the chat experience. Delivering a wonderful chat experience with a lot of
yeah,
automations in it, where we're not just answering the questions, but we're now delivering the thing that the people want.
yeah,
And then the next thing is really making that content and those conversations really insightful so that we're feeding back into the business some really great actionable insights that they can make their business better.
no,
It's that virtuous cycle that we're really working on creating. And so I would love to be at the core of every business that has large numbers of customers and that we can kind of be that engine that drives that
yeah,
whole interactive experience.
yeah. It's incredible to think about the amount of use cases and usability the product can have, especially with everyone kind of trying to educate their audience a little bit more, which I've seen much more of a trend in the last few years, which is having this whole educational component to collaborate with their customers. But thinking about collaboration, you mentioned the amount of work that has to be done is going to have to increase to get the same results. How, as a founder, do you maintain the motivation within your own team? Are you reinstilling values? Do you have active meetings? What mechanically do you do to make sure that your team is motivated, focused, and still kind of in line with the trajectory of where you're going?
Right now, I think it's really about getting people excited about the future, right?
Yeah.
People who want to work at an early stage startup are trying to be part of the next thing, right? They want to be
Yeah.
creating things in the world that matter and that will change the world. And
Yeah.
so the more that we can show how that is happening and the more that we can bring that to life for our team, the better. So for me, there's nothing better than to show a customer success story. Hey, everybody, take a look at what this customer did with our product. This thing that they can do now is game changing for them. And we'll even post like what the customer is feeding back to us, or we'll post like examples of how they used our product in really cool ways that are now game changers for them. And
Yeah.
that gets people excited because they can see like, I worked on something last week. Now the customer is using it and they're having a great experience and
Yeah.
they're getting the results that they wanted. So it feels very meaningful.
Yeah.
Whereas working at a big company where you're like, I'm working on a project that who knows if it'll ever see the light of day,
Yeah.
let alone change the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so where we are, it's like every day we get to see that. And to me, that is the best and most exciting part of this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some rapid fire questions I'd love to shoot your way and I'd love to hear your answers. First one is, what is particularly hard about your job?
The level of energy I have to keep up all the time. Everyone expects me to always be like on. My day starts early because we have people on the East Coast. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm already on from like 5, 6 in the morning here.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I've got people behind me in time. So my days are very long. And there's an expectation that I'm always like, I have that
All the
energy
energy in the
level to
world.
give
Yeah.
all the time, no matter what. So I would say
Yeah.
that can be tough. And sometimes I don't even get a break to eat or
Yeah.
drink of, it's been 5 hours and I haven't even had a drink of water. Like,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
sometimes that.
Yeah. What's one thing that you use to decompress or re-energize yourself to take on the long days?
I would say it's time with my family. I have kids, teenagers, and they just always remind me of like what really is important. So I would say hanging out with my kids is my favorite thing to do. And then I also have a vegetable garden. I grow a lot of different veggies out back. I have fruit trees. I've got lots of plants and
Yeah.
it's really fun to go out there and say like, oh, what am I going to make for dinner tonight with everything I've got here? Kind of a cool experiment
Yeah.
to do every day. Like tonight I have tons of beets. My beets have just come in. And so I've been like thinking, how do I
Yeah.
incorporate what beet salad am I going to make for dinner? Or should I roast beets? Should I
Yeah.
do a beet hummus with them? There's so many creative ways that you can use those. That's something that's really fun for me.
I love that. I love that. Speaking about family and just, obviously, I think one thing that goes unsaid a lot of times is the different responsibilities that founders have, not only work, but also outside of work and other people that rely on them. How do you set the expectation with your family and your partner and everyone around you that, and the consistent schedule and regiment that you'll have to work, but the time that you don't have focused on the company, you can kind of be more present with them. How do you go through that communication and what's challenging about it that a lot of people don't know?
Yeah, you see, I kind of changed. I don't really see my life as like I'm on mom mode or I'm on work mode. I'm just always on me.
On,
Like I'm just
yeah.
always. And so what I've actually done is I've incorporated my children
Really?
into my work. So actually from the time they were very young, if I was working on a presentation, I would actually have them sit up next to me and say, look, I'm working on this presentation. Can you see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
This right here is financial forecast, or this right here is a product roadmap. Let me explain to you what it is saying. What do you think? And so I would get their feedback and they'd be like, oh, I don't really like that picture. When they're little, they would just be more like the colors of the slides, or I don't understand that word. But then as they got older, their feedback got really good.
Yeah.
And so I actually use my own children as my sounding board for a lot of business related topics. So they'll get involved if I'm working on something and they see me working on it at home. I just say, hey, come sit, watch me do this. Tell me what you think.
Yeah.
What do you think of this pitch? Or what do you think of this presentation? Or, hey, we're working on this new product. Let me show it to you. What do you think?
Yeah.
And they feel included, right? So Botco.ai is just as much their company as it is mine, right? They have been with me building this thing side by side. And so they don't feel like I'm spending some time away from them.
Yeah.
This other thing. They're part of it. And then the other day, of course, my kid, they've grown up with an entrepreneur. They have absorbed all of this. One day somebody asked my daughter, the 13-year-old, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she's like, an entrepreneur. Like, what else would I
Obviously.
be?
Yeah.
And then my older daughter that's in college, she's constantly texting me new business ideas. She's like, Mom,
Yeah.
what do you think of this? I'm going to do, I'm thinking, so they've just been raised, I think,
Yeah.
as apprentices essentially of mine. And so they're going to take those skills and go off and do great things. But I just used it as an educational opportunity. And I used it as kind of like start of school was just being raised at home with me. And that's how we did it.
That's incredible to hear the impact. And I always love when it breeds other entrepreneurs, because that just means there's going to be more products. There's going to be better solution. Everything's going to advance. And so it's awesome to hear. If you weren't working on Botco.ai, what would you be doing?
I never think of that, Julian. I am doing exactly what I wish I was doing. I mean, I can't even imagine. If I had all the money in the world and I didn't have to work on like work or whatever, I'm sure I would be off somewhere in Central America, probably building some kind of educational program for women somewhere in the world. I feel like education is really the pipeline and the leveling field for the leveling of the playing field. What's the right term for that?
Yeah.
For everybody in the world. And unfortunately, in many parts of the world, women get shortchanged. By second and third grade, they're often required to start working or to help out with younger children at home. So they don't get those opportunities. And so one of the things I think about, like, oh, what would I do after I retire? I would go back to Central America, which is where my family is from. My mom is from El Salvador. I was born in Costa Rica. I lived in Guatemala. That's where my roots are. I would go and I would do something with Indigenous women or help create educational pathways for young women so that they could do what they really want to accomplish.
That's amazing to hear. And it's only going to foster just more, and especially with technology nowadays being so accessible, and you can kind of set up infrastructure not as taxing as it used to be. So it's exciting. And the whole decentralized movement is going to see hopefully some more positive results. If you were to have more time spent in one particular area, whether it was work or life or maybe even a specific task, what would you want more time to do?
Sleep.
Yeah, I can echo that.
One place. So that is the one thing that gets shortchanged constantly.
Yeah. I can echo that for sure. Whether it was early in your career or now, what books or people have influenced you the most?
Yeah, I'm kind of, this will probably sound super cliche, but the Michelle Obama Becoming book was probably one of my more recent favorites. Of course, her book came out maybe during COVID. I think it was like 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago that I read it. And what was awesome about her story, and I found really I connected with, was the fact that she also came from kind of unexpected place, south side of Chicago. I was from Central America, just somewhere where you don't really expect somebody to come out and become great from necessarily. And just her tenaciousness in getting into Princeton and her tenaciousness in advancing her career and just being so thoughtful about her family. There were just so many things about the way that her life evolved and unfolded that I found very relatable and almost comforting to read. I would read her story. So I love it when I come across women like that have a very different journey than mine, but in some ways relatable. And so I love her story and I can't get enough. She just came out with another new book, which I'm already reading. So
love that.
I truly love to follow.
That's amazing. And I know we're close to the end of the show here, Rebecca, and I'd love to give you a chance to give us your plugs. Let us know where we can find Botco.ai, where we can be engaged with you as a founder. What are your LinkedIns? What's your Twitter? Where your website? Where can we get involved with Botco and be a fan and supporter of the technology we're building?
Yes, thank you. I think we're most active on LinkedIn. It's just Botco.ai on LinkedIn. And then myself is just, if you just type in the words Rebecca Clyde, I'll come up. And I should be pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. On Instagram, I'm CEO at CEO Rebecca Clyde. And then Twitter, it's just at Rebecca Clyde. I'm not super active on Twitter anymore, though. For many reasons, but you'll find me mostly on LinkedIn. That's where I spend the majority of my time. And then we put on a lot of webinars for our company. So if you're interested in listening to some of our content, or we're putting out a lot of reports, the state of chatbots in B2B marketing, the state of chatbots in contact centers, the state of chatbots in healthcare and behavioral health. So you'll probably find a topic that is useful and hopefully helps you do your job better on our website. And I would love to support any of your audience members that are looking to become more knowledgeable about conversational AI and how they can use chat to make their business more productive.
Amazing. Rebecca, it was so incredible in learning about your background and experience, your insights into marketing and content, and also the future of AI and how we think about all these different ways to use it. But the best principles are the ones that we can actually use it today. And it seems like Botco.ai is that tool. So it was exceptional to listen and chat with you. And I hope you enjoyed yourself. And thank you again for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julian. Thank you for having me on Behind Company Lines.
Thank you.